I don't know if it's ever going to be a point where Kentucky truly has to worry about the rise of craft, of kind of like overtaking it, because it is a different consumer and it is a different type of person that's buying it. But the reality is that I think craft needs Kentucky. I still think that the outside regions need Kentucky, because that is going to be the gateway for people to get into this. And that's how they're going to find out about it. Hey everybody, welcome back. It is another episode of Bourbon Pursuit, the official podcast of bourbon. I'm Kenny Coleman.
Ryan Cecil here.
Fred Minnick.
And we're going to be talking about regional whiskeys today. You know, it's something that Kentucky's always been king of bourbon. They literally have a King of Kentucky bourbon named after it. But you've seen the growth and the rise of stuff that's coming from outside. And that's stuff that, you know, we've kind of championed a lot between all of us over the past couple of years. You know, we've got to the point where we've started talking about Bob's Boring Bourbon, because it's a lot of Kentucky stuff all the time. And now that craft doesn't have the crap synonym along with it, you start seeing a lot of these distilleries come up around different places in the country, and people are gravitating towards it. They love it. And I think you're even finding more of a fan base that is latching onto it because it's their area and they have some hometown pride in it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at all the regions that are out there, there's usually like one that kind of like pioneered everything, and a bunch of people that followed it. And it's almost like that in every state that it hit. And the one commonality that is there is that they typically have good brewing cultures. And so they're able to like bring in people from breweries that can help on the fermentation side. So I've always believed that Kentucky doesn't, enjoy a terroir effect. I mean, maybe a little bit, especially in the beginning, but what they enjoy more than anything else that has made them the greatest whiskey state in the country is people, access to people, Vendome, Independent Stave, the numerous distilleries that you could just pluck a bottling operator off of. This state has the resources and the people who have the skills to run a distillery, whereas other states have not. And so it's been a much bigger learning curve. But if you look at states like Colorado, Washington, Texas, a lot of them have pulled from the brewery industry.
Just like poaching people, or are they kind of looking at it going like, well, we make good beer. I think we can make good whiskey. And you think that comes from grain selection, or do you think it comes from just the people and their tenacity to want to do more?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of the wanting to do more, and also it's knowledge. Like, the fermentation part, it depends on who you talk to, but there's some who will say it's the hardest part of making whiskey, because if you mess up fermentation or you cook it too much, you burn the corn in the process, like it just can ruin everything for a batch. And there's no fixing it. There's no barrel that can fix moldy grain. There's no, finishing technique or distillation technique that you can do that will, take care of an overcooked corn. You can't fix that. So if you start your company with very fine fermentation and you get people on your team that know fermentation, you're already a leg above people who don't have that.
Yeah. Because breweries, like if you talk to a brewer versus a distiller, and brewers will be like, they're really anal about cleaning and controlling environments because of the yeast factor, and distillers have kind of been more like, we have our yeast,
it'll
but
distill out.
That's
fine.
There's open air fermentation, this and that, and it'll be distilled out. But I think, you see this like obsession with having like clean facilities and proper fermentation where you can get like really interesting, unique flavor profiles, especially coming from the beer world, because they're working with a bunch of different, grains and hops and yeast and whatnot. So it's really cool. And the American palate is, obviously through the craft beer movement has advanced to where it doesn't just want like a lager. It wants to experience all different kinds of flavors. And you kind of see that in American whiskey. Obviously the whole spirits category is going through downtimes. roughly about 1% to 2% on spirits for this year. But you see like Wild Turkey or Campari, Wild Turkey, Bullet, Jack Daniels, they're all down like almost high single digits, double digits. And so, people will be like, well, people aren't just buying anymore. And I'm like, no, they are buying. You just have these regional players that are taking market share from these big brands, whereas this is my hypothesis, but, whereas people thought bourbon was just Wild Turkey or Jim Beam or this or that, but there's all these regional players. And, if you're in Texas, everybody in Texas loves Texas. Or if you're in Colorado, like you said, you have that fandom that comes from coming in your backyard. And I think they're pulling market share away from the legacy distilleries.
Pulling a little bit. And I think you still have a lot of the news cycles that are coming up of smaller regional craft distillers that are going out of business because of either they call
That's
it
true,
downturn.
but you have the ones that are
market.
doing it right, and they are pulling some market share, I believe.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've spent a good deal of time in Colorado and watching those distillers, and the people I see go into those visitor centers and have cocktails there. I don't think they were drinking Kentucky bourbon. Like that was one of the things that I witnessed when I was doing like a documentary kind of thing there that didn't take off. But
where was this at?
This was in Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah,
What was the documentary supposed to be about?
I was trying to do this. I was trying to do this whole thing about,
Was it the rise of regional craft distilleries?
it was like a
apropos.
Yeah. It was basically a story of, I was going to do one state at a time. It was like a docuseries, and it just, it was all filmed before, like right after the pandemic, and it just, it's one of those things like you have like a 2% chance of a show getting picked up, and it was very close. I made to the finish line with like 2 networks, but nothing ever happened. But also my partner on it, the producer, got COVID and nearly died, so it had a lot to do with it.
That'll put a little hiccup in it.
But one of the things I witnessed, like just observing the visitor centers of these like smaller distillers, these people were not bourbon drinkers. They might have been craft beer drinkers, but they were more people who wanted to sit down and have a conversation and support small business. And that's something that I've noticed that has been paramount to the success of these smaller distillers is they're not so much they're not trying to get like a Bourbon Pursuit listener. They're trying to get a person who doesn't drink whiskey and be a fan of them. And that's why I also think that they have so much more leverage on flavor profiles, or so they can have so much more leeway on flavor profiles, because like so many of these whiskeys don't taste anything like bourbon, but they got bourbon on the label, and their fans are like, oh man, this is great in a Manhattan. Like, okay.
I disagree, but that's fine.
All right, whatever.
Yeah, the rise of the regional thing, I think, you do have the hometown pride, right? You've got there's something about it, and unfortunately, I don't think you can really have. Can you have hometown pride when it comes to Kentucky? I mean, you do have people that are in Kentucky. They're like, I only drink Kentucky bourbon, and then you go to Wisconsin, but people still drink Kentucky bourbon, but they probably have more pride in something that is more
like
local,
Driftless Glen or Dancing Goat or something
more local to them than going, yeah, I'm Wild Turkey ride or die.
But their wallets probably say otherwise.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, you do have just the financial aspect that, yes.
Let's be very clear about Wisconsin. Their livers are mutants. They drink more than anybody else in this country. So, like, after they've had their 7 brandy old fashions, they're having a little Driftless Glen, and then a Wild Turkey. So,
yeah.
But I think that a good one of those case studies for me that was when I was going to, making this whole documentary was Iowa. So Iowa,
because of Cedar Ridge
became the number 1 selling bourbon in Iowa. They overtook Maker's Mark, and Cedar Ridge is not a national brand, but they own Iowa. And like that whole that story to me is like, that's how you should go at it from a business perspective. Own your backyard before you try to go national. And, that's a interesting one. Another one is Texas. Texas was really largely Balcones and Garrison Brothers for a long time, and then Iron Root came out, and then you had a few others, and then out of nowhere, it felt like for me as someone who covers the industry for a long time, Still Austin just came in and said, "This is ours, and we're going to bash Kentucky at every chance we can."
They sure did,
And
didn't they?
and they not only became like a Texas darling, but they became a national brand. And I would like to say it was the bravado, but their whiskey was and is great.
I still think it's
Well,
probably
it's funny
one of
they
the best
bash
things to come
Kentucky,
out.
but I think what's made Still Austin more appealing than nationwide than say a Garrison or Balcones is that they replicated Kentucky production methods and all the column distillation, everything. And whereas Balcones, doing pot still, doing their own style of Texas whiskey, they were like, we're going to copy the formula that Kentucky and Indiana has done, and we're going to do it here in Texas.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. And that has appealed to everyone nationally. I wonder sometimes too, like if Still Austin wasn't as brash with their approach, would they have turned more heads? I've always wondered that because their whiskey's great, and I'm like, would it have stood out alone by itself without the marketing? I don't know.
No, I think it was a few different things. I think the name, the brand had a lot to do with it, right?
Yeah.
Austin, Texas, it's just a cool fucking place. If you've never been to Austin, it's like, go there on a trip.
And the timing,
Just want
perfect
to say,
too.
go Pokes. One of our former fierce rivals in the Big 12. But Austin is a cool town.
It's a sweet town. It's got a lot going on, and it kind of has just like, I don't know, maybe for me, you think of just like what Austin embodies, and you're just kind of like, cool, like I like Austin. It's a cool place. It's just like it has a pull to it just because of the name alone. If you would have called it, Humboldt Texas whiskey, you'd be like, okay, I'm probably not going to be as intrigued by it.
Yeah,
but there's just something with
the
it.
timing it came out is when you saw the mass flood of the migration to Austin, Texas. During the pandemic, you had a lot of new California, New York, whatever, all those other states moving to.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of like right place, right time too, because like it is like a cool, hip brand. And then you have all these cool, hip people moving there. And it's kind of like the perfect storm. The stars lined up.
Yeah.
And you throw in like Nancy Fraley, so not only do they appeal, to a younger, hipper demographic, but you have the pedigree of Nancy that helps it like be respected by whiskey fans and enthusiasts because she's the gatekeeper. And so they're hitting like all aspects of the market just brilliantly.
Yeah, they did a good job. The other thing I want to think about the rise of regional whiskeys is coming, a little bit to grain selection. Obviously, I think Pennsylvania and the one that I can't pronounce is like the Mahakane-Kalakala.
Oh yeah.
Whatever.
Monongahela.
Monongahela. Yeah, I still can't. I've been getting crap about that since day one, and I don't think I'm ever going to change and try to get it right. But I mean that is something where you see that being built up because that is like a pure Pennsylvania thing. You've also had Rosen rye, and so there's definitely things, at least in that region, that you can only really get there that kind of creates some sort of hometown pride as well.
Yeah, and same with the Empire Rye.
New York. Yeah,
but is Empire Rye? Is it like the Mahagala, or is it more just like, hey, it's just rye, but it's grown here in New York, therefore it fits a?
Well, they had a historic style, but I mean nothing like Pennsylvania. But I think anytime you have like distilleries working together in a region, that's a flex, and that's what Empire Rye was. It was a flex. As we talk about the regions and everything, I think it's very important to point out that some places, some distilleries survive despite their region. Like Frey Ranch is an example.
Oh yeah,
like Nevada is very restrictive on water rights. And so for Frey Ranch to be able to blossom and do as well as they am, to me, that's one of the most remarkable stories in all of whiskey. You got someone like Smoke Wagon that can't get enough water to actually do his own distillation there per the laws of city ordinances and region, there in Las Vegas. And if you want to move outside of county, it would be the same thing. But at Free Ranch, they're able to do it. And they're also, it's like, hey, this is also our own corn. I mean, they're a great success story. California has had a lot of distilleries come and go, but you don't have to look too much further than recent tragedies to look into California's water rights. So like water,
because of the fires,
the
and
fires,
Palisades,
yeah, that sort of thing happens. So like local governments can have a big impact on what will become a successful region. And I think California would have been, when St. George was in their prime, probably 2012, I would have picked them as probably the best, craft distiller in the country, for with all they do. But, with the various restrictions that are on California, like we kind of lose a state there. So
interesting. Yeah, I didn't really think about it because California definitely is one of the most restricted areas when it comes to it.
I guess you got like Redwood Empire that's in California, right? And they have like a pretty big following.
They have a very big following.
Yeah, they do very well. In San Diego, Pacific Coast Spirits is very strong. So California's a massive. That could probably be 4 or 5 states, to be honest with you, in comparison to other parts of the region. So some places have fewer restrictions than others, and some are more open for distillation. But it is not an easy state to open a distillery. So if you look at the states that have opened up the books of opening a distillery and what it's taken to get there, I think a good case study is Tennessee. Now, Tennessee, of course, we know, great distilling state, but it was not an open state if you wanted to start a distillery. And so Chattanooga whiskey and everything that they have done they basically changed all the laws, everything they could, just to start a distillery. So I mean, we're still in the infancy of the distillery business, for post-prohibition of people opening up. It was just Kentucky, Indiana, and a couple other states, Tennessee, for a long, long time. And it's only been in the last 20 years that we've seen interest in people wanting to open up. So to me, it's a beautiful thing, and it's fascinating that we are talking about regions that are really growing up and competing despite some of their governments.
Yeah. Ohio seems like they've really empowered distilleries. You have like High Bank, Middle West is like a giant there that just
acquired Old Elk,
to double down on their stake. They're a big contract facility, but then you also have Watershed. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Watershed, and you see like a big popularity with Ohio distilleries too, especially with the Ohioans. Is that how you say it? So yeah,
just call them Buckeyes.
Buckeyes, that's right. Unless they're like Bowling Green fans or something,
or Bobcats. They could be Ohio Bobcat fans.
They're in Cleveland and they don't want to represent Columbus, right? Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of things that are happening within the world of just the regional growth of where we're seeing that come from. Both of you have mentioned different ways. The Chattanooga one, I think, is a great example of something of kind of just breaking past the law of being able to get and open up. And they're kind of doing their own thing. They're not really finding something that's considered Texas style or Tennessee style or whatever. It's like they're doing their own style. They're not doing the Pennsylvania rye.
He's a brewer.
Yeah, it's that. I mean, but it's a lot of that kind of goes into maybe just finding your own thing, but finding the people that are around it that can kind of latch onto it. When I think of Chattanooga versus still Austin, I think there's still a difference in the growth and sort of like what they can essentially capture out there, because still Austin has done a fantastic job of going out to market with like 4 products. And then Chattanooga has, I don't know,
a new product every 2 weeks.
Yeah, 282 different releases at this point. Yeah. So it's hard to kind of keep track with that. But I think that's what makes them individually unique in their own right, is that they are trying to find ways to capture their existing audiences already. But when we start thinking about this, I mean, we've talked about Colorado a little bit. Colorado has its own set of fan people that are out there, because people love the Colorado flag, and people put that all over their whiskeys and everything like that too. So there is something of some sort of hometown pride when it pulls back from that particular state.
Yeah, I think every state has that. Stranahan's, planted the flag for Colorado, and they were a big leader in the single malt movement. And I think that's one of those things where, when we talk about bourbon, single malts almost kind of coincide with the regional conversation. We talked a little bit about rye, but um, they almost have built the playbook for the larger distillers who has started to dabble in the single malt side. I mean, it is fascinating too to see the amount of talent that has come out of Stranahan's. There has been a lot of people who have left Stranahan's and worked for other distillers, or go on to work for Metallica and blend their whiskey. So you've got all kinds of skills being developed at these other regions that Kentucky could have never, harbored because they didn't play around with malts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes into a little bit of let's talk about like a competitive landscape with it, because we've talked about Kentucky bourbon being king, but is Kentucky bourbon trying to compete with itself and trying to get lower as they possibly can on the shelf and trying to just be that broad mass market consumerism versus what the type of audience that a regional whiskey's trying to play after, like different flavor profiles, different, maybe like higher priced in the base and the consumer aspect. What do you all kind of think about that? And of like, where do they see themselves competitively, and should Kentucky bourbon worry about it?
I mean, I don't know if they have to worry, but I do think you do see people that would just drink Kentucky bourbon starting to move toward these regional craft kind of just to like dabble into it. And I don't know that, I'm not sure there's a brand outside of Kentucky that can ever reach the size and scale that the big six here have. I could be wrong, but maybe still Austin could, but I just don't see it. I mean,
well, I don't think they have a product that's less than $15 on the shelf that you could be able to do that, right? I mean, that's penetrating a different portion of the market.
Well, what's interesting is that distillery existed in the 60s in Peoria, Illinois. The Hiram Walker Distillery was the largest distillery in the world, and they made Tin High, and that was one of the examples that the Kentucky distillers would use to be, that would set them apart in the marketing circles. Like, that tastes like drivel. Like, no one likes that, but it was a massive, massive distillery. To this day, if it would reopen at that time, I think it would be the largest or one of the top three. It was huge. And I think we can all, when we look at the Seagram's distillery in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or MGP, I think we still all kind of like paint that with the stroke of the Kentucky aquifer brush of like, it's so close. It's kind of lumped in that area. But I think the bigger threat to I think the distillers look at you all, the blenders of the world, as a much bigger threat.
Oh, yes, finally.
Then I think they look at you all as a bigger threat than the regions that like Still Austin. Still Austin may take a bottle off the shelf, but High West, Barrel, Blue Note, Blue Run, Pursuit Spirits, those are just a handful. That's taking up a whole shelf. They're at a liquor store. They're not stocking 291, Breckenridge, and Woodinville, and St. Augustine. They're not stocking all of those. They may get one or two, but they're stocking the blends. You can walk in the stores. They're stocking them. They may just be one. Barrel used to have their own shelf. Now they're down to one bottle, maybe,
because it's a lot of Kentucky, Indiana stuff that's already lumped into
right.
The flavor profile that's probably in most people's appetite.
But that shelf still exists. The blended shelf still exists. If anything, it's gotten bigger. What's retracted has been the craft distiller aisle. So I think the big six, their big competitors, is who they're selling on the wholesale side. you guys.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think another way to kind of think about this is, you kind of mentioned the retail side. Is there a portion of the country that can satisfy the need of going today you go to Total Wine or Liquor Barn or wherever, and you'll walk down the aisle and, the bourbon aisle is just massive. But it's a lot of, the same stuff, right? In a different bottle. Is there a point where somebody could actually come in and be like, okay, now we're going to start segmenting this off by states. You go Alaska, Alabama, Arkansas, all the way up. I don't know if that'll ever exist.
Like in wine?
Yeah, kind of, right?
Yeah.
It's like this region, this whatever, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that'll be able to exist, and I don't think there's going to be a market in the country that truly wants that. I feel that when you're in California, you're in Texas, or you're in New York, it's like you want to have your pride on the retailer, be like, hey, here's our California bourbons or a California whiskey, same thing in these different parts. I don't know if you're ever going to see the part where it's just like, yeah, I'm going to create the largest, bourbon retailer outfit in the nation. I want bourbon from everywhere. And then sales will immediately tell you, this is what people are coming here for. And if you're located here in Kentucky, it's probably not going to be a bunch of Colorado whiskey.
Yeah. You've seen craft brands from outside of Kentucky, and they all want to be here, rightfully so. But I think they would all say it was a mistake coming here. It's just, they can throw resources, sales teams, this and that. There's just a different consumer here that's not necessarily going to explore that. Whereas I think Woodinville is a great example. It crushes it in Washington, Oregon, California, kind of, where their home roots are. I would say they would tell you when they came, and trying to expand into Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, it was really tough for them because people were like, even though Woodinville, I think, is an incredible product, we absolutely love it. But consumers are just like, it's not my Knob Creek, not my Jim Beam or Buffalo Trace or this or that. And so it's really tough to for those regional players to fit into the typical style, bourbon style that the Midwest, South have kind of, grown accustomed to.
Yeah, you have to. I think that's one of the core situations with the American whiskey drinker is if someone says they're a bourbon drinker, but they don't go outside of the circle of Seagram's, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, and Kentucky, then they are strictly a Kentucky bourbon style drinker. And I think that's something that, Max Shapiro used to always bring up. He's like, this is what a bourbon drinker is. Someone who likes this stuff. All this other stuff coming out is it's really bad for Kentucky bourbon. He used to always bring up it's going to be what happens when someone thinks, and he brought up Hudson. He's like, what happens when someone tastes Hudson bourbon and thinks that's bourbon? It's going to move them away from the category entirely. And I always disagreed with that. I was like, no, I just don't think they're going to be. I just think they're going to be unique to that brand. And I think it's a real shame that people don't explore their palates outside of the region. But it is what it is. That's some people are Coke drinkers, some people are Pepsi drinkers.
That's why chain restaurants work so well.
Exactly.
Even though it's the blandest, boringest food, people are comfortable with it and safe with it. They
know what you're going to get.
You know what you're going to get.
The chicken fingers are going to hit every single time.
We go to the same Mexican restaurant probably once a week.
You order the same tacos, the same bowl, and
I'll change it up a little bit.
Are you a Fiesta time?
He's a Gordito Crunchwrap Supreme.
It's Limonia Soul.
Limonia Soul. Yeah,
that's a good one too.
Yeah, and my youngest son is hard. He won't eat. And so he'll eat their chicken soft tacos. So it's like we go there so we don't have to, have the chef cook up a hot dog in the back. So.
Other things that I think about when we come to the, the regional side is I don't know if it's ever going to be a point where Kentucky truly has to worry about the rise of craft, of kind of overtaking it, because it is a different consumer and it is a different type of person that's buying it. But the reality is that I think craft needs Kentucky, because Kentucky is your gateway drug, right? This is your lower priced that everybody, hell, how many times do we have to have these conversations a year? Is is Kentucky bourbon better than craft because of the price? And it's like, what can I get for $50 in Kentucky versus, anything else outside of that? And the 99% of the time we always come back and be like, well, Kentucky's still a pretty damn good deal at the end of the day. I still think that the outside regions need Kentucky because that is going to be the gateway for people to get into this. And that's how they're going to find out about it. Everybody here that's probably listening probably had a bottle of Maker's Mark. It's probably one of their first bottles they ever had because that is the gateway drug for a lot of us in this world.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. But it's not even the, another thing I was just thinking about is like, all right, look at what wins the awards every time. It's something from the Big Six. I know you all had Smoke Eye Hill win the Ascot Awards, but too, that was made at MGP.
That was made at MGP, yeah.
It was a blue corn made at MGP, aged in Nevada. Is that where they're based out?
Yep.
Yeah. And so it's like you look at it time and time again, it's either a non-distilling producer that's using MGP or Kentucky, or it's a Kentucky legacy brand, winning those awards. And so
maybe it's the problem with the judges in the competition is what it is, right?
Yeah,
that's what they've got their mindset on what bourbon should taste like.
Well, so to that point, when it comes to competitions, what makes a great competition whiskey is something that will stand out, something that you can taste 300 things in a sitting and it'll continue to stand out and doesn't have flaws in it. And so where, what gets eliminated pretty quickly are things that are over oaked, things that have any kind of over bitterness there that, or some kind of burntness there that's caused, it's a really good, competitions are really great ways to, if things, consistently don't win, those, if you dial them in, you can see through a panel of professional tasters, they typically have flaws in them. And so it's, to me, the big tastings, those big competitions are great ways to find products that don't have significant flaws and then have something that can stand out on your palate after you've had 300 things. And so I always like to say, like, if it's all put together, but there's something pretty special there, it's going to stand out. If it's just average, it won't.
Well, and two, it's so tough. Like, I always make me and Brian Bikey talk about this. It's like, I'll say like Starlight, for example. If I'm just in that Starlight zone where I'm just tasting Starlight, like, it's pretty good. But as soon as I like go from like a well-aged Kentucky bourbon to Starlight, I'm like, it doesn't like even come close.
Yeah.
But if I'm in that wheelhouse, and so it's like craft whiskey, Starlight's a great product. I love Starlight. When you taste these craft products against like something that's been around for your palate's just accustomed to it, it does kind of like, it's not that it's like flawed or something, it just has something different that you're like, that's weird, compared to like everything else.
Yeah. And, the one that has consistently beaten those big brands has been Still Austin. So, yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And also, like, if you study like judges and like how they pick things, they can't help it. And I'm no different. You go to what your base is, and my base has always been bourbon, so I tend to skew bourbon, unless it's sometimes the scotches are so damn good that there's no way around that.
Let's shift a little bit and talk about marketing of a regional product to different regions, right? Obviously, you have people that are like Still Austin or Breckenridge that hold the name of the location as its product going out there to to different markets. And some people, we've already talked about Still Austin. I guess if you're a big skier, you love Breckenridge, right? Different kind of ways to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But how difficult is it to sit there and say, if I'm going to try to put my brand on the line, do I want to do it? Do I want to say I'm proudly from X type of region and then go try to promote that in Texas or in California or in Maine or wherever it's going to be? Or do you try to figure out, let's create something that is maybe universally accepted, where it doesn't have to have a connotation associated with it. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this one.
I think you got to do everything you can to own your backyard, right? And I think you got to be proud of where you're from because your backyard travels. And I go to Cedar Ridge, go back to Iowa, and that brand means something to those people. Kind of like Slipknot does as a band. Iowa's a very, very much if someone is from Iowa,
I guess the better
they're going to
question
support Iowa.
Is like, do you think it is more paramount to somebody's success to actually bring the name with it? Because it's like, I mean, we already talked about Still Austin, Breckenridge, Woodinville, Cedar Ridge, St. Augustine. All these are
okay.
like
okay.
this,
So
and
if
it
you're
says,
from
like
Iowa,
putting the name into the.
Yeah,
if you're from Iowa, yes. If you're from Florida, no. I think it depends on where you're from.
Well, you just don't like Florida Man? Is that
no?
what
I just don't think. I don't think Floridians support, Florida businesses just because. And also, it's a ton of transplants in Florida. Iowa, those people will, if they get buried in another state, they're going to want Iowa on their tombstone. They're just very loyal to Iowa. Same with Texas. And in Oklahoma, it'll remain to be seen because it's still a relatively new distilling state. But there's not a lot of product from Oklahoma coming out. But people who have, like Hatchetown, they put Oklahoma in the name because Oklahoma means something to people. I just think it depends on the pride in your state. If your state has a lot of pride and they support it, then absolutely. California, I just don't see, when Californians move, they try to assimilate into the business population of where they are. They're moving to Nashville. They're Tennessee whiskey fans. They're not going to go to the store and buy California whiskey because they moved from California. I just think it's regional dependent.
Yeah. Well, that's understandable. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, obviously in the case of Texas is always very passionate about, their sports teams, their barbecue, their whiskey. So like Texas, and it's a massive population. So I think branding something around Texas is at your advantage. But you're going to have, the problem is assigning your name with your brand is when you're trying to expand outside of that. That's where it gets tricky.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's like in Florida, trying to sell TX whiskey in Ohio.
Even though,
how well is it going to be?
I mean, I studied geography, obviously we all did, but if you just had a bottle of Cedar Ridge, I would never tie the two to like Iowa. I wouldn't be like, oh, that's an Iowa whiskey or something. I know it's a town in Iowa, but I would never, or XYZ town.
They've got Iowa pretty big on the bottle, though.
I was going to say, I wouldn't have known either if it wasn't for the whiskey world. I'd be like, I've never heard of Cedar Ridge.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, you got to put
I was like, is that the place that has all the roller coasters? You're like, no, that's Cedar Point, right?
Yeah. I mean, so like, I think why Frey Ranch has been successful is because it's not a Nevada type product. It has really cool packaging. Frey Ranch, they really tied around the farming aspect. And so it's like a packaging and a brand that if I'm in Georgia, I wouldn't necessarily think it's Nevada whiskey. I would just be like, oh, that's a cool looking bottle.
Yeah,
Killer
they
top.
definitely.
And if I buy it, and then I tried, then I learned more. Oh, that's cool. That's in Nevada. But if it was like Nevada Ranch whiskey, in the same package, I don't think it would. I don't think consumers would be like, oh, Nevada. I don't know if I want whiskey from Nevada.
Yeah. Frey Ranch is such an outlier too.
And Ben Holiday too. I mean, they really kind of understate the Missouri side of things. It has this like cool old vintage, logo. It doesn't scream like, well, I'm from Missouri,
bourbon.
Missouri bourbon. And I think, and two, they have a, weeded, which is a very approachable type, and people are used to it from makers. I think that's why they've been so successful, because it's not like Missouri proud, this and that. It's more like a name that is not a regional name. So if your goal is to scale it past your yard, I think you got to go with a name that's not necessarily tied to your yard.
That's smart. Yeah, that makes sense. I think Ben Holiday will be one that will probably starts selling the Missouri Vantage Point soon. They should anyway. Something interesting that we've kind of danced around a little bit is the packaging. Still Austin's packaging, they're cool labels. Frey Ranch is probably top 5 packaging in all of American whiskey. Chattanooga, great packaging. I think I think Chattanooga has the best corks in the entire business. So I think the one little thing that we kind of skirted around, how important is packaging for these like smaller companies?
Yeah, it's still very important. People drink with their eyes, Fred, and that's what it all comes down to. And depending on if you want to be, loud and proud with your state on the front, that's all going to play a huge part into how much do you really want to market this as being, a regional whiskey versus something that is a little bit more, I don't want to say the word generic, but I guess more, able to be recognized by a lot of people. And I think that's why Frey Ranch does a really good job. It's probably why maybe a name like Woodinville might not mean anything to anybody.
Yeah, nobody's like Woodinville, Washington. They never
well, I never would have known Woodinville, Washington if it wasn't for Woodinville whiskey that we would have known about it. I mean, I know you talk geography, but I've never.
Wine people know Woodinville.
Wine people do. Yeah. I certainly didn't because I'm stuck in my Kentucky bourbon bubble. But I do think that packaging is always going to have a paramount role in this. There's just no way that you're going to get around it. This is where hiring a good design agency or having a good logo is always going to have a really, really important factor into it.
Yeah, 100%. And two, it's funny seeing not only just craft producers, distillers that have their own product. You see NDPs that are kind of regionally successful. I think how Strong Rivers is doing, or someone like Short Barrel's really strong in the Atlanta, Tennessee, kind of in that southern, rare characters kind of all over. There's no really regional tie to that, but it's interesting seeing I remember in Colorado there's a bunch of NDPs that had MGP bottles, but everybody thought they were Colorado whiskey even though it was MGP. They stuck to the Colorado branding, and it was still successful. And so I think it just depends on your goals. If you're trying to create a wide scale, you got to definitely make it a more mainstream brand and product, not focusing on where the whiskey was made.
And depending on how wide scale you want to be, you kind of have to know exactly what your scale point's going to be too. If your scale point is saying, listen, I know that I can create enough whiskey that I am happy and I can satisfy my debt and I can service it at 15,000 cases a year, you could probably get that done in a single state and you could have the state pride behind it. But if you want to become, 50,000 or definitely 100,000 brand, there's no way you can do that in a single state. No, there's just,
maybe in Texas.
Maybe, I don't even know if Texas can do it. Because you've got a lot of competition in Texas. You've got, I wouldn't say legacy or heritage, but you do have your Garrison Brothers and your Balcones and your TX whiskey that has already been in the market before you. And so if you're going to go and try to compete with them, well, the pie is not getting any bigger by any means. It's shrinking for everybody at that point.
Yeah. And I think also Texas does have water restrictions, so I think that it depends on the region, with Texas.
Yep. Well, I've enjoyed this one, being able to talk about some of our favorite regional whiskeys. And here's the thing is we talked about, I don't know, maybe 20. There's thousands that we don't even know about or heard about or anything like that. So there's a lot of things that we still have yet to discover, even inside the regional whiskey category, and figuring out what we like. And hopefully, I don't know, if this is how we know about things. If you've got something that's really regional to you, and you're like, this is some of the best damn stuff I've ever had. I don't know. We should know about it.
Detling's one that's kind of...
in Alabama.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Yeah. I was just thinking about them before we were about to close off. I was like, well, I got to mention Detling. Glad you did. They're so good.
What makes them so great? Because I've only heard people talk about it. I actually haven't had a chance to try it
yet. I would say, first of all, their warehouses get up to 150 degrees in the summer. So they cook in there. I will say that... it's some of the most complex whiskey that's out on the market, period.
Yeah, it's not... I've had 4 or 5 different Detlings through Sealbox because Brian's in our office just trying their picks.
I need to go
And
rummage
some of
through his
them
office.
I absolutely love. And some of them, the flavors are just way out there that I'm like, oh, this is just too off the norm for me.
Yeah.
But the ones that were good were freaking awesome. Like they were really
That's
good.
right.
I mean, you can tell it's a pot still, but it has like, and it just has like a really nice, like chocolatey, syrupy, like balanced with oak. It's just like a really, really good, well done when it's done right. But being a craft distillery, and we've experienced this with like Finger Lakes, who's one of our partners, is when you're not bringing in truckloads of grain and you're buying grains by the bags or the bushels, then things are going to vary from batch to batch, and there's going to be that inconsistency. So, but yeah, Detling I think's a brand that's really done well, especially in the South, and it's starting to make waves throughout the country too.
Yeah, I'd like to see what they could do at scale, like have some small batch regular products out there, because everything that I've had that's been exemplary has been single barrels. And as you know, I mean, single barrels, you can build a name off of single barrels, but you can't scale single barrel.
Yep.
Unless you're Pablo.
Pablo, Rare Character, does a very good job of that right now. I don't know how they do it, but they've got to be ripping their hair out every single day dealing with labels and stickers and all that sort of stuff too. But guys, again, very awesome. If you like the show, you like to hear more episodes like this, you can send us an email. It's podcast@bourbonpursuit.com. You can also leave us a review. That's the best way to make people know about it. Or you can share this episode with a friend, especially if you heard us talk about one of the brands on here that people at that brand. You should go ahead and share it with them if they're not listening to it already. And if you do love the show, you can support it as well for as little as $5 a month at patreon.com/bourbonpursuit. But with that, cheers, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Toodles.
Vodka sucks.
It sure does.